Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here with some slow burn romance recs. So today's video is actually a collab video that Bex Reads put together with a bunch of other booktubers that we're all sharing our favorite slow burn romance recs. So I am so excited and so thankful to be a part of this. So definitely go check out all of their videos, see all of the recommendations that they have for you today as well. So I have 14 slow burn romance recommendations to recommend you today. Some of them are older, and then I have some newer romance releases as well. So kind of like a mixture of everything, and we're just gonna quickly jump into it. So first up is Mixed Signals by BK Borison. This is the third book in her Love Light Farm series. You can totally read this as a standalone. All the books kind of exist in the same world, the same friend group, but you can definitely read them as standalones. The couple in this one is so sweet and adorable. This is one of my favorite books in the series. I love this book so much. The heroine in this one is actually a co-owner of the Love Light Farms, and she also runs the bakery on the farm as well. So the story kicks off with the heroine on a horrible date. Her date even ends up leaving her at the bar, and so she's a little bit stranded, and she happens to notice across the bar that the hero is there as well, and they're both from the same town. He's actually a regular at the bakery. So the hero has actually been secretly crushing on the heroine for quite some time, and she has no idea. So they see one another at the bar, and they end up actually sharing a ride back to town together, and on the ride they end up chatting, and they start sharing all of their like horrible dating experiences that they've both had. The hero ends up opening up to the heroine, and he tells her how like all of his dates end up fizzling out by like the fourth date. He's always kind of classified as the nice guy, and so he's kind of just like wondering what he's doing wrong. So he ends up kind of jokingly to the heroine that they should go on some dates together and see what they're doing wrong so that they can kind of figure it out. Purely for like a social experiment, of course, not because he's like secretly pining for her. It's just so cute and fun in here. This one is actually a sunshine pairing, which I had no idea existed, and I didn't know I needed it in my life until I read this book. I love these two together. The hero is the ultimate cinnamon roll hero. He's a substitute teacher. Like I said, the heroine runs the bakery on the farm, and she's one of the co-owners of the farm. I liked in here how they're both romantics. I loved how he'd been secretly pining for her. I also just liked how he really believes in the heroine and is super supportive of her. So if you haven't read the Love Light Farm series, highly recommend it. They are so good, especially Mixed Signals. All right, next up I have Just a Heartbeat Away by Cara Bastone. So I absolutely love this author. I have read all of her books. This book in particular remains my favorite. I have reread this one a couple times, and it just always hits for me when I think of slow burn romances. I totally think of this book every single time. So this is the first book in her Forever Yours series, which these are kind of standalones. They all exist in the same friend group, but you can totally jump in wherever. This one is definitely my favorite in the series though, and here we have age gap, we have a single dad hero, and we have this like friends to lovers situation. So this one starts off at the beginning of the story with the hero actually becoming a widower, and he has lost his wife, and he's kind of struggling with taking care of his young son. So he even gets called out by his son's kind of kindergarten teacher, which ends up being the heroine. So she ends up calling him in for like a parent-teacher conference and is like, okay, I know you're struggling, but like these things need to get done, and like here's what you can do. So she kind of creates these lists for him and really gets him on the right path to be a good dad and like know what he needs to do for his son. And so we cut to 2 years later where the hero is just very supportive and active in his son's life. His son is going to a new school, and when they're there, they end up running into the heroine again because she's actually the guidance counselor at that school. So the hero also starts like working or volunteering at the school as well during like the lunch hour, and so they end up spending some time together and kind of become friendly. The heroine though is a lot younger than the hero, so he doesn't see her as like a possibility. She also has a boyfriend as well at the beginning of the story, and so he doesn't think anything's gonna happen, and so they just really become friends first, which I loved. These two or three really with the son as well, they really become a part of one another's lives, and she starts helping them out. There is some caretaking scenes. It is just so sweet and so good. This one, the slow burn, is super drawn out, but I promise you when it gets to the sizzling part, it is so satisfying and so good. Highly recommend this one if you haven't checked it out yet. Next up is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is another author that I've read all of her books, and I love them so much. This one is definitely my favorite though. This was actually one of my favorite reads of 2023. So in this one, the heroine is an ER doctor. She has been recently divorced. Her brother is needing a kidney replacement. She kind of just has a lot going on in her life. She's also kind of wanting to be promoted for this new job position. But then the hero is actually one of her new co-workers, and he might be up for the job instead of her. So she kind of instantly takes this disliking to him. The hero though, he has anxiety, and he's just really terrible at first impressions. So he actually ends up writing the heroine a letter and kind of delivering it to her locker at work. And so they kind of start this like communication that way, and they become friends first. They both end up opening up to one another and just really get to know one another. The hero shares how his ex-fiance is now engaged to his brother, and so he kind of ends up asking her once they become friends if she will join him and be his fake date when he's around his family. That's really where the story kind of kicks off, and so it kind of goes from there. This one is just just so heartfelt, so charming. The hero in this one is just the sweetest thing ever. Like, he must be protected at all costs. I love him so much. The hero in here is just the most genuine good guy hero. He's been pining for her. It is so stinking good. The mental health rep, the anxiety rep, I absolutely love this one and highly recommend. All right, next up is a new release. So we have Wild Love by Elsie Silver. This is actually the start of her new Rose Hill series. This one is a small town romance, and like I said, it just came out this month. So like I mentioned, this one is small town. It's set in Canada, and here we have a billionaire hero. We also have like a little bit of a frenemies to lovers setup where the hero and heroine have actually known one another for years because she is the hero's best friend's younger sister. When the story starts, the heroine has actually lost her job, so she has moved back to their small town, and when she gets there, she actually ends up getting a job and working for the hero. The hero in this one has a lot going on in his life, and so when the story starts, basically this 12-year-old girl ends up showing up at his doorstep, and she's like, hey, you're actually my biological father. And so it kind of goes from there with him figuring out that she is the result of him donating sperm at a sperm facility years ago. So that's why this one's kind of being described as a single dad romance as well. This one does start off kind of slow. We see that the hero's been pining for years. Like I said, they kind of have that like frenemies vibe going on where there's a ton of banter, so there's a lot for them to kind of work through, but they do have a ton of history together. So yeah, definitely check out Wild Love if you haven't yet. All right, speaking of new releases, Older by Jennifer Hartman is the newest release from this author. This author always delivers on slow burn and angsty romances, and this one was no different. So this one has age gap. It's also forbidden as well because not only is the hero double the heroine's age, he's also the father of her best friend. So in this one, the hero and the heroine, they actually meet at the beginning of the story before they realize who one another is, and so they meet, they connect, they really hit it off and start to have feelings kind of grow from there, but they end up going their separate ways that night, and then it cuts to months later where they meet again, and that's when they realize that he is the father of her best friend. It gets even more complicated because the heroine, she has very abusive parents, and so she was actually taken in by her best friend and her best friend's mom, and so she lives with them, and now the hero, he is the father of her best friend, and so he has recently moved back to town to kind of get to know his daughter and be in her life more, and so that means he's around the heroine more as well. This one is very much about the forbidden vibes of them trying to, you know, keep away from one another and not show their true connection, lots of like secret moments between them, and here the hero is a jiu-jitsu trainer, he owns a gym, and the heroine is super into photography. This one as well takes place in the mid to late 90s, which I absolutely loved being a 90s kid and growing up in that era. I loved all the like 90s alternative music in here and just all of the vibes and feelings. If forbidden and age gap isn't really your jam, that's totally fine. I'd probably skip this one, but if you love those vibes and you want more of like an angsty slow burn, I highly recommend this one. Next up is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This is another author that I have read all of her books, and this one is one of my favorites from her. So in here, the heroine is actually a theoretical physicist, and she also moonlights as a fake date for hire to kind of make ends meet and make some money. So one of her favorite clients is actually the hero's brother, and so she pretends to be his fake girlfriend. She pretends to be a librarian, and so the hero kind of knows her from there, and they don't vibe very well. So the heroine's fake dating cover actually gets blown because she is a candidate up for a new physicist job at MIT, and so when she's there, she ends up meeting the head of the physicist department, who is the hero, and he's super confused because he's like, wait a minute, not only are you supposed to be my brother's girlfriend, you're also a librarian? Like, what are you doing here? This one just had a good balance of kind of that academia and the inner politics that happen at school, as well as this kind of like hate to love vibe going on with the hero and heroine. Unlike the heroes in the author's other books, the hero in this one is super confident and just upfront about his thoughts, which I really loved. He's kind of been frustrated with himself for secretly wanting his brother's girlfriend, so now that that is not the case, he kind of has some feelings towards that. I really liked in here as well how the hero just really wants the heroine to be herself. He notices right away how the heroine will just kind of fit herself into any social situation, and she will kind of fit the personality or the vibe of what people around her kind of want and just kind of go with that. And so he's like, I just want your true self. Like, I want you to be who you are. So I liked how he kind of calls her out multiple times about that. He's like, I just want you to be the real you. Stop trying to please other people and fit in, like just be yourself. So I really appreciated that. And here as well, the heroine has type 1 diabetes, so we get some of her kind of life living with that as well. Next up is Marriage for One by Ella Mays. So I read this book 5 years ago, and it's one that always pops into my head when I think of slow burn romances. This one is a marriage of convenience that I feel like is done so well. If you haven't picked up this book, I highly recommend. Basically in this one, the heroine's wanting to open up her own coffee shop, but because of reasons and some things happening, she ends up having to marry this man that she just met for the first time, which is the hero, because of like this business proposition he has for her. This one just is slow burn and done right, where you feel that tension and all of their like little touches. You're just like living for all of those moments. This one I highly recommend if you love slow burn plus a marriage of convenience, where they have to kind of fake it publicly with their marriage, but then behind closed doors in private, they start to have all of these feelings growing. This one is like an oldie but a goodie. All right, so speaking of books that I read 5 years ago is The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. This story is one of those books that has just stayed with me. I feel like I will never forget this book. I love it so much. This one actually takes place in a fictional town in Alaska, which if you don't don't know, I live in Alaska, and I feel like the Alaska rep in here, even though it's like a fictional town, is just so accurate. So in this one, we follow the heroine, Kala, and she actually was born in Alaska, and her mom kind of couldn't handle the isolation of Alaska life, so she picked up herself and Kala and moved them back to Canada when Kala was a toddler. So the story starts off with Kala. She's all grown up, she's living in Canada, and she kind of gets this call about her estranged dad who still lives in Alaska. She finds out that he's not doing so well, and if she kind of wants to make amends or even have a relationship with him, she should probably come and visit soon. So she decides to take the chance and return to Alaska to kind of reconnect with him. Kala is very much a city girl, so when she comes to Alaska, she's not really ready for the rough terrain and kind of the isolation that Alaska has. So her dad owns a bush plane company in Alaska, and she ends up meeting one of the pilots, which is Jonah. Jonah is just the ultimate grumpy, stubborn hero, and he kind of can't stand Kala right from the start. This one, I just ate this book up. I love the romance. It's very much a slow burn. I love the found family in here, the friendships that we see. I loved seeing Kala kind of reconnect with her father. Just so good. I highly recommend this book to honestly everybody. All right, and I feel like we couldn't have a slow burn video without recommending the queen of slow burn, which is Mariana Zapata. So this is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. This is another book that I read, I think 5 or 6 years ago, and it's one that always comes to mind when I think of slow burn. This is another marriage of convenience. This one is also a sports romance as well. Basically in here, the heroine has been working as the personal assistant to the football hero in here for quite some time, and she's kind of feeling overlooked, overworked, and just doesn't feel appreciated by the hero. And she's like, you know what? Why am I doing this? She's like, I'm kind of ready to become my own boss. Like, that's it. I quit. So she ends up quitting, and then a couple weeks later, the hero ends up coming to her doorstep and kind of begging for her to return to his life. He's like, we need to have this marriage of convenience. I need you to live with me. We need to save my career. This one's just so good. I feel like if you ask anybody about a slow burn romance, they're going to recommend Mariana Zapata. Like I said, this is my favorite from her, so I highly recommend The Wall of Winnipeg and Me if you haven't checked it out yet. This is the indie cover, which I know they've recently gotten picked up by a publisher, so either way, read this book. Next up is Ready or Not by Cara Bestone. So I recommended another one from this author earlier, one of her older books, and this is her newest release. This one actually just came out in February of this year. This is a surprise pregnancy story where it's not the hero's baby. We also have found family, we have best friend's brother, and we have kind of finding love unexpectedly. This one starts off with the heroine actually finding out that she got pregnant after a one-night stand hookup, and to say she wasn't ready or expecting that kind of life plot twist would be putting things lightly. The heroine's life is honestly just a mess. She still needs to figure out what she wants to do with her life. She needs to figure out what she's going to do with her job and her career. She's trying to figure out her friendship. She's trying to navigate kind of how to be pregnant, kind of coming to terms with being pregnant and becoming a possible single mom. She's also kind of dealing with the feelings towards the baby's father and just all of these things happening in her life. This one is just a super sweet and tender story of kind of finding out that you're suddenly pregnant and then kind of all the highs and lows that come along with that. This book just very much feels very real, very messy. Things are complicated, but there's a lot of like sweet tenderness under there as well. The hero in this one is the absolute sweetest. Like I said, he is her best friend's brother, and he's kind of been in her life for years as well. So it's kind of got this like friends to lovers slow burn happening as well. Just so sweet, highly recommend. All right, next up is Ashes of You by Catherine Cowles. This is the 5th and final book in her Lost and Found series, and I love this book so much. This is actually my second favorite in the series, and I highly recommend it. This is a small town romantic suspense series that they're all kind of standalones. They exist in the same kind of friend group and a family group, but you can totally read them as standalones as well. This one we have age gap with the hero being older. He's also a single dad to 3 sons. This is also a nanny romance, and this one just has all of the slow burn, found family, protective vibes. The hero in this one is the chief of police in their small town, and the heroine actually ends up coming to town to find a nanny job. So she actually ends up working for him, and neither realize that they actually have a connection from the past until they, of course, see each other in person. You actually see how they know one another in the prologue, where you find out that the heroine was actually horrifically abducted in her past, and the hero was the one who saved her. So they very much have this connection, but it also makes the romance slow burn because of kind of the trauma and the things that have happened in the heroine's life. I just adored this one. I loved seeing the relationship, of course, not only with the hero, but I loved seeing the relationship the heroine has with the hero's sons as well. His sons are just so cute and so charming and so funny. I love them so much. They become protective over the heroine as well, which was so sweet. Like I mentioned, the romance in this one is slow burn in the best way that makes sense for the characters. The romantic suspense element as well was done so well. Like I mentioned, the heroine has been through so much in her life, which you get a glimpse of with the prologue of the story, and I just loved seeing the strength that she has, the way she deals with her anxiety, just such a strong character. I love this one so much. Next is Where We Belong by Ashley Munoz. So this is actually the second book in her Stone Riders MC series. This is a motorcycle club series. It's actually a small town as well, and this one's a little lighter on the MC than some of the other MC series out there, so if you're kind of wanting a new one to check out, I highly recommend this one. This one is one of those slow burns where the hero is very much tortured, broody hero who doesn't think he's capable of love or doesn't want to fall in love or have anybody close to him because he's worried about losing them or their safety kind of becoming a risk because of his feelings towards them. Basically, he is the MC club president, and so he has a lot of people coming at him all the time, and he doesn't want the person person that he falls for to like get mixed up in that and be held over him, like if somebody realizes his feelings for them. So it's slow burn that way because the hero is just trying to push away his feelings and pretend he's not noticing himself falling for the heroine. This one's forced proximity as well because they actually end up living together. Basically the heroine in here, she moved to this small town, to this MC community because of her best friend, which was the heroine of book 1. We also have some hate to love vibes between the hero and the heroine as well. And like I said, it's just so good. The tension, the angst, the broodiness of the hero. Absolutely obsessed with this one. One of my favorite things is when a hero doesn't think he's capable of love or doesn't want to fall in love. And so I loved seeing the heroine here fall for the heroine. All right, another new release is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. This is the second book in her Skyland series, which follows a group of friends. You can totally read these as standalones, but I highly recommend the first book as well because it is so good, which is Before I Let Go. This one actually toes the line more of women's fiction, but it does have a romance in here as well, so just know that going in. Basically in this one, the heroine ends up finding out some secrets and some things that her husband did. He's in trouble with the law, and so he actually gets imprisoned and is kind of taken away, and the heroine becomes the kind of single mom to their 3 daughters. So she kind of has to figure out how she's going to pay for the roof over their head, pay for all of her daughters to go to private school, all of their like extracurricular activities, and just how they're going to live. So the hero is somebody that she meets at the beginning of the story, and he is kind of involved with the reason that her husband is actually in prison. And so to say that that relationship is complicated would be putting it lightly. The heroine, she's just kind of feeling burned out by men and with what her husband did to her. So she's kind of putting all other men like on the back burner. Like she's not interested in possibly a romance or a marriage ever again. And so the hero is kind of just always around waiting for her to realize that he's there. I absolutely love the hero in here. He is the perfect guy. He's actually the father to 2 twin sons who are autistic, and he kind of co-parents them with his ex. If anything, I wanted more time with him and the heroine in the story. Like I said, this one would be kind of classified as a slow burn romance just because of the fact that the heroine's kind of finding herself, figuring out who she is, trying to take care of her daughters, trying to navigate this new world of kind of being single and having to be the one financially responsible for her family. So she's kind of dealing with all of that, and like romance is on the back burner for her. But like I said, the romance is so good as well when it kicks in. All right, so next up I have a fantasy romance series recommendation. So this is the Kindred's Curse Saga by Nicole. This is actually the second book in the series, but the first book is Spark of the Everflame. And this series, I recently read all 3 books that are out, and I was absolutely obsessed and couldn't get enough of them. This one is totally slow burn. There is a romance in there, but there's a lot of fantasy and magic and other things happening as well in the world. They're all on Kindle Unlimited, and I highly recommend because the first 3 books are out, and book 4, the final book in the series, comes out in June. So the perfect time to binge the series. This one we follow the heroine story. This is kind of like a new adult fantasy series where she's kind of realizing things about her world, things that they were maybe lied to, things that they didn't really know completely. We have kind of like royals and court intrigue and kind of those politics that happen in there. We have this like war happening between things, the heroine discovering more about the magic in the world, and it kind of goes from there. I don't want to give too much away, but it's just so good. The second book, Glow of the Everflame, like 0 notes, 5 stars, perfection for me. So highly recommend checking out the series and like slow burn where the romance doesn't really kick in until a lot later in the series. All right, so those are all the slow burn recommendations that I have for you today. Definitely let me know in the comments if you have read any of these or if you have any slow burn recs from me. I'd love to know. Thanks again to Bex Reads for putting this collaboration together. I can't wait to check out everybody else's videos, so make sure you do that as well. If you'd rather leave me an emoji in the comments instead today to let me know that you watched this video, leave me the heart that's like on fire, the burning heart emoji. I feel like that's perfect for slow burn. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I will see you in my next one.